All right. Good evening. It's 6:30. We have a quorum. We'll call the planning board meeting to order. And first up, original, Mr. Dwyer.
That would be Mr. Iser, unless he's observing.
He's our
No,
own guest.
Mr. Iser better have, Mr. Dwyer and Mr. Maximowski better have received a plan that I sent.
Yeah.
So Randy, obviously you knew I would not be able to sign it as an abutter. So you're very astute.
So do you have that, Bill? You can put it on the screen.
Right now it won't let me show the
That's the Kelly A&R.
Yes.
yeah. Okay. I've got to download it because it is not
Okay, well, I can talk about it while you're doing that. So this is Kelly A&R at the corner of Stockbridge and Roosevelt Street on the westerly side of Roosevelt Street. There's about 30.5 acres there right now. It's all in APR currently. Mr. Kelly and his wife Marcy would like to divide it. 5 acres they're going to keep, and 25 acres the Devine brothers are going to buy. So the lot 1 is what's going to be kept by Kelly. Lot 2 is what's going to be acquired by Devine. As I said, both of them are currently under APR restrictions, so there will be no further development of either lot. It's pretty cut and dry.
Randy, was this under the APR program? Was this the old APR or the new APR? Was there?
Was there what, Joe? I'm sorry.
Well, regarding the price, because under the new APR, the state has the right of first refusal. Well, maybe Bill knows the answer, but so did they have to go through a lot of paperwork in getting other bids or not?
I don't know the answer to that, Joe, but I know that Johnny Kelly has worked with the APR people to get to this point where he knows that they are going to allow Devines to buy this.
Yeah, okay. Obviously, they're in the farming business, so that would be no question. This is harking back to the Seaglo property that was originally purchased at a higher price, but then taken away from that person.
Oh, yes.
But
no, I don't believe there's any of that going on here.
Look, I was just looking for some information, and
that particular problem involved a mortgage foreclosure sale too. So that's not what is involved here.
Oh, no. But the APR program is still a good program.
Oh, yeah.
It has its flaws, but nevertheless, it's... Yep.
Right. Any questions from anybody? Not? Motion to approve?
So let's, I can't tell if Mark is actually here at the moment.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
When I try to get right on top of the image, you don't want to see my face that close, so I just turn off the camera.
Joe is in a butter, and I have represented all of the parties at various times. Okay. And I don't know if I will be representing them in the future. So I think if Mark, you could make the motion, and Mike, you could second it, and then it'd be 3-0-2.
I would make a motion to approve as submitted.
Second.
Like motion and second. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Oh, let's do a roll call vote for this one. Mr. Dunn?
Oh, okay.
Mr. Sires?
Aye.
Myself? Aye. Mr. Dwyer?
Abstain.
Mr. Zagradnik,
Abstain.
motion passes 3-0-2.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. I will be in touch, Jimmy, and we'll
Okay.
take care of the rest of it.
Whenever, okay.
All right, thanks a lot. Have a good night, guys.
Okay, have a good one, Dave.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
And let's see, I believe Kyle Fennell is part of Pioneer Valley Planning Commission.
Yeah,
Let's take the plan down, Bill.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Kyle and Ken are
Yeah,
here
okay.
to
Okay.
take my abuse.
Mr. Quinlan, have
that's it
anything?
for-
Oh, we got an invoice to pay for Kyla. She attended that CPTC seminar last week, I believe, for $40. Anybody else go to that?
I
No.
signed up for it, but I did not make it
attend.
there.
Okay.
But I got the handouts.
Okay. So we have one invoice to pay for Kyla for $40. I'm assuming she'll somehow submit something to the accountant, Bill?
Yes, I'll go over whatever she needs to do.
Okay,
So I'll make a motion to reimburse her for $40.
Second.
I would second that.
motion second. Any discussion? None? All in favor? Aye.
I
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Very good. Okay.
Since PVPC is an appointment and not a public hearing, I don't think there's any harm in just
Moving.
jumping into it.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Comia and Mr. Kyle? You are up, gentlemen. Welcome.
Hi, board.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Your holiday red on.
Mine is orange, but Kyle's is red. I saw him at the office today, so his is red.
Trying to get into the spirit, Joe. Well, I think the big topic that we have for you this evening, forgive the late notice, but I sent over the latest version of your draft rules and regulations. And I'm happy to open that document up now for you if you'd like to share the screen, but
When
I'd
did you
also
send
like
it
to-
over?
I did send it over this afternoon. I believe I
4:13 p.m. if I
Oh.
remember.
unfortunately
Okay.
timestamped. So I believe I sent it to all the board members, but it's very similar to the last document. And before we actually get into it, I was hoping we could entertain a bit of a back and forth because it's the latest version has all of the reference documents that Mr. Dwyer has provided, and we believe all the feedback for this ongoing process. And at this point, I'm curious, it's about a 40-page document, and there may be more content to build into the thing. But I'm just curious if making sure that it is reflective of what the board is doing, if approaching it moving forward at the regularly scheduled meeting is appropriate, or if a subcommittee might be a better approach. We only got through 8 pages last week. I don't know if we'll get further along this week. I know this is a top priority and I want to advance it expeditiously, but I also want to be respectful of everyone's time and would appreciate your feedback on moving forward. Is this the best approach?
Recommendations on the board. What would we like to do? You like to do?
40 pages is a lot. I mean, we
Fair.
will wade through it, but to expect an ordinary citizen to be able to wade through something like this, I'd be expecting a lot. I don't know if it could be honed down to fewer pages or not, but
I do see a benefit to going over it That's what we did with the master plan. That's what we did with the subdivision regulations. And yes, it's a lengthy process, but hopefully we won't have to do it very often. We get everything put together and build it the first time, and the next edit's going to be a lot easier. So we have tried the best we can to hold the first Tuesday of the month for planning issues. And if we take it in, hour-sized bites, we'll probably get through it faster than you might fear.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do. Okay, Mr. Sars or Mike or Mark, what do you think?
I agree with that. I mean, enough with subcommittees. Let's just go for it.
Yeah,
I do think, yeah, that if we can take it in bites, as Bill said, it looked like this had the predominance of the highlighting on the last page under administration.
Yeah, right. And that is a carryover, and so that's part of what I think. If the board is in agreement, and don't let me cut you off, Mr. Chair, but if we're in agreement to take it in sections at our regularly scheduled evenings, hopefully in about an hour, I think the first question I have then is, can we get to an agreement of, is everything we want in the document in terms of big chunks present, or are there glaring omissions that we need to address? Would the board agree that would be the first thing, rather than going line by line?
I'd start with the outline and then get to the weeds.
If we could get into that, part of the reason I bring this up also is because I believe there is a lot of redundancy as we brought over sections of bylaws that we could start just to omit. It might make the process go a little bit faster, but if we're ready to jump in, I'm happy to share.
Yeah, why don't we start with the outline and see if we can highlight anything that we don't have,
Right,
that we've omitted.
And I'll just take this moment to whine, as I did on the email, that by the virtue that this came in this afternoon and I worked until I just got home, I quickly scanned through it but did not read it for content. So I feel wholly unprepared to make constructive comments on it. So hopefully I can add comments after the meeting and we can discuss if there's any content.
that's a good point, Mark. And I think if we just go over the outline tonight, even if it doesn't take an hour or so, at least have everybody contemplate the basic outline and what is needed. Is something missing? Is there too much? And just go from there. Maybe it's just it'll be a good starting point.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, and I think yeah, I'd like to circle back to that once we get through the outline and get a sense of what we like. So pretty standard opening sections. Last meeting we got through, I believe it was only the first 8 pages, but I believe it was the first 5 sections. So these should be familiar, and we can jump to the particular subsections if we like. But introduction, organization. I believe there was no huge omission there. We actually added a little bit of content. So then, sorry. So organization, meetings, I believe we added a section on absences, if that's correct, since the town adopted the Mullins rule. And please interject if I'm mistaken. But then we get into preliminary review, which I don't believe we had any large issues. Removing the preliminary review fee.
Kyle, if I can just interject, and Jim or anyone stop me if you disagree, but for someone as Joe said, just an ordinary citizen watching this, could I just ask you to correct me if I'm wrong in saying that this is basically almost like a charter to describing what our board is and what we do, right? I mean, this isn't a bylaw that so much affects someone's property. It's more about our process. Is that, just to get the over, so everyone knows what we're talking about.
And it's kind of a guideline of our process, and where certain things are a little bit fuzzy, this kind of clarifies and gives explanations on things that the way we do things.
But I like Mark glanced at it and just went through a few things, and I just keyed on home occupations, and it actually said what you can't do. You cannot hire somebody in your office besides the owner of the business, which I think is kind of odd. What if you want to bring a bookkeeper in? Hell, I remember my mother used to work for Bobby Hahn half days at Lakeside Fuel doing bookkeeping. So just there's other things besides procedure in here, I think, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, that particular thing on home occupation is just a repeat of the actual zone bylaw. And a home occupation is somebody who has no employees, works completely out of their home for basically running their business, but they go out like an electrician, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay, or a plumber or anybody like that. If you have an employee, even if they come into your house and do bookkeeping, well, you may need a home business. Or, it depends, I guess, how much time they spend in your house doing bookkeeping. If they come in, I mean, those are, we're getting into kind of splitting hairs here, too.
Yeah, and well, it actually illustrates maybe an approach. Maybe we should reconsider our approach and not just make the regulations a summary of the bylaw, but maybe focus a little more on how we conduct a hearing. So and I'm sure, I know at one point Ken did an inventory for us, because we have multiple bylaw sections that say, and the planning board shall adopt regulations. And we basically haven't for anything apart from the village center overlay.
Right.
So this is filling in some blanks and checking off some boxes. I'm looking forward to giving it a more thorough review too. I didn't actually even see it come in until you told me you had sent it, and I checked for your name. So I'm completely cold on this, except that I've been involved with aspects of it for a while.
And Mike Sires, in one way, these regulations could also define how we interpret the home occupation, such that if somebody comes in and hires a bookkeeper one day a quarter to look at their books, well, that's not really an employee. That way, we give a little bit of leeway on certain things to better define things.
Okay, good. By the way, one or two of my sisters work for Bobby Hahn too. Come to think of it.
Okay, so we can turn the talking stick back to Kyle. Sorry for that little sidebar. I just want to clarify.
Oh, that's important.
I agree, and I do appreciate the sidebar, Mark, Mike, everyone for contributing. Bill is correct that there's some content to add. There's some clarity to be made. And I think there's also more value in this document than just reiterating exactly what the individual bylaws say. So I think if we start to get past the more administrative general sections 1, 2, 3, we start to get into the how the board conducts business and the circumstances which initiate each step. We start to see some larger sections like section 5, special permit review. I think this format of, excuse me, sorry, I got to the wrong page there, but this pattern of a quick reference to where the authority is coming from, what the task for the board is, what the role of the applicant is, and then procedure. I think that's a very logical pattern. It doesn't hold true throughout all of the circumstances that we get into. And I think that's where we may carve off our size bites sections that we can address in turn. But I just wanted to point that out as a pattern for the board to consider.
Sounds good.
I, again, not just thinking about the value of this document for the board, but also Joe had mentioned, you know, for a citizen wanting to bring business to the board, a more concise but accurate document, I think, is preferred. So then we just start getting into the sections. So we said we weren't going to do this, so I'm going to go back up to the table of contents just to follow this pattern and review what we have. So we have commercial site plan review or approval, excuse me, in section 6, and I just need to move my board. In section 7, planning board hearings, including site visits. We do have our fee table, which we'll want to make sure is accurate and up to date. And I believe the way that it's written now, it also claims to supersede any other documents. This is supposed to be the most accurate and up to date fee table. We have a section 9 waiver of rules, waiver of compliance, and a request for waiver of rules, excuse me. Section 10 is more administration. We can jump to that if we'd like some more clarity on that. It's really just codifying when these are adopted and how to go about changing those. And then you start to get into the more specific bylaws and circumstances that the board will have, such as design reviews for limited business. Excuse me. So, and then home occupations, we added the home occupation section, which is, I believe, Jim, you pointed out, it's pretty much that bylaw. We have some questions about it. Section 13, erosion sediment control, is very similar. It's just about the entirety of that bylaw. And the inclusionary zoning, which was added, Mark, you noticed a lot of highlighting in that section. The highlighting is actually, I believe, the most relevant sections of the bylaw to bring into the rules and regs, but that is the entirety of the bylaw in the document currently. So that's how it's structured now. Yeah, I welcome feedback from the board at this point.
Yeah, so Kyle, on that 12, 13, and 14, where it's, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like we've started by putting the whole novel in here. Should we not consider boiling it down to what the other intent was to kind of how the process works, or it's, I don't know.
Yeah,
Because
would you-
I'm just
excuse me,
afraid
Bob.
if we have too much information, no one's gonna read it.
Exactly.
Why would you put home occupations in this document when in actuality it might represent 10% of our business? Why is it here?
I guess he's trying to cover all the options, but
Well, because it says the planning board shall adopt regulations, so we're trying to put the regulations for each of the areas where we're supposed to adopt something. I don't think we need to repeat my 2 cents. I don't think we need to put the bylaw into the regulations. We need to put only the pertinent sections that we're trying to adopt something that's a little bit fuzzy, if you would, or how we do things.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I guess the question to ask is, when the board adopted these particular bylaws, particular to home occupations, that's the one I'm most curious about. Was there a conversation at the time about where you could find rules and regulations that wouldn't be found per se in the bylaw? Or was there some discussion by the board when this was passed that would have suggested that there are rules and regulations to administering this particular bylaw that are not served well in the actual bylaw and should be in this particular document?
I'm going to suggest that it was probably language that was imported from a draft and never questioned or challenged.
Okay.
So it stayed. Although I think Jim you were working on the home occupations and I was working on the bed and breakfast at the time.
That's right, yes. Yeah,
If you read, you're right, Bill, in the original documents, even before I came on, it was candy making and dressmaking were an example of home occupation. And those were merely examples, I think, to follow. And a
Right.
lot of that was written from a text of Professor Bacon from Amherst College, and it would check off the boxes what you want to have in your bylaw. So we've come a long way with individualized.
And I don't think we should have, there's been some discussion, not a lot, but some discussion about getting rid of the inclusionary zoning bylaw. That's one member's dream, and I don't know why we're focusing on that here.
Let's keep it in play for the time being, even if it's just a placeholder.
Right.
Maybe we'll come across that magic definition.
Yes.
Payment in lieu.
Payment in lieu.
Or it may be all resolved if we come up, if the state adopts some form of sales tax on high value homes that will go to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, then we can look at it a different way.
yeah.
It appears that the word adopt is being very kind. It appears that the state is dictating zoning now.
So be it.
So be it.
They make the rules.
Well,
Yeah,
I thought our town meeting made the rules.
Only because Chapter 40A spells out what town meeting can do. Remember, there are limitations of what town meeting can't regulate in 40A.
you want to secede from the state, Joe?
No, but certainly the idea of having the National Guard come in and declaring an emergency because it's something that is politically feasible And if you live on the MBTA line, they're really, that's a little bit more onerous. They say you can take down a single family house and put up a 3-story apartment building with no parking as long as it's on the MBTA line, and that's overruling local zoning, but that obviously is going to be challenged.
So the one thing I am seeing as we go through this, and I don't want to get off on too many tangents.
I agree.
If you could go back just back to the outline.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm seeing as you scroll down, let's just see if we can stay on these 2 pages.
Yep.
Organization, the meetings, the preliminary review, special permit review, then you'll jump into site plan approval.
Yes.
Then you have at least 2, if not 3 sections that are administrative again. Hearings, fees, waiver of rules, and administration.
Okay.
It seems like all of those could go into the first unit.
Right.
So not necessarily combining or consolidating, but just shifting 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, I think they probably could live within 1, 2, 3, or they could become the new 4, 5, and 6.
Right.
I think there's probably some certain redundancy there. And then if you'd scroll down towards the end, I think the rest of these are all pretty much substantive areas.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the question would then be, what is missing of the substantive areas where you want to elaborate and clarify those fuzzy details, as Jim mentioned?
So if you would go back up to
Yeah, I mean, what triggers getting here as a process? I mean, food trucks, A&Rs, accessory apartments. I mean, what?
How do you make the cut? You're right.
So if you go back up to, well, first special permits.
Yes.
I think you have some language that the planning board has authority over certain special permits. I think that might be a good place to incorporate. I believe you did an inventory, or so there's an inventory somewhere of what special permits we have authority over.
Yes, yeah, I recall. We'll have to dig that out. I remember putting something together for that.
So rather than say certain bylaws, just say what the special permit jurisdiction is.
Right.
I think we want to have a reference here to the separate subdivision regulations, which we have already adopted. So just a clarification that, yes, we have authority to adopt subdivision regulations, and we have done it in a separate document.
Right. Okay.
And then I think we just want to be sure that if we do have wherever we have, if these 4 or 5 site plan approval, home occupation, if we only had promised to adopt regulations in a few of them, then we should have that few at least as a starting point. And the rest of them can be covered under the general special permits section. We do have site plan approval, which is a special permit for appeals purposes, is probably the most common one we do. Home occupation was big for a while. The one we just did is the only one we've done in the last 5 years, probably. And I don't know as we've ever done a site plan approval for soil removal.
No.
And to your point, Joe, I think that, yeah, it may be a 40-page document, but at the same time, if someone's coming in for site plan approval, they're not going to be worried about how long the chapter on inclusionary zoning might be. I think if we can keep, most people are only in for one thing or two things at any one time. So they'll look at the portions that just relate to what they're interested in.
Thank you, Mr. Dwyer.
Is this a good place in this document to put a general statement about limits of our approval, that our approval is on our bylaws and codes and does not bypass other, what you have on that standard sheet that they sign off after an approval, would there be someplace in here that would be good
I
to?
think that would be appropriate.
Trying to remember if there is a
The
statement.
boards within and required, yeah, that statement, good point.
Yes, okay. If it's not here, I'll make sure to include that statement of authority and limitation. Mark, thank you.
Because I'm just trying to think, this is kind of a place to put FAQs, things that I'm thinking of it as a place to, if it's the first place that people go to who don't, they're not like Randy Iser, that they're here every other meeting,
Right.
might be a good kind of, FAQs isn't quite the right term, but
Yeah, but correct me if I'm wrong, Mark. You're picturing something like an appendix that might just be like a streamlined process for any applicant, or quick, quick.
no, we've worked on that kind of stream, that if then,
Right.
but it gets very case by case. I don't know. I think Jim or Bill might correct me, but I think we might have wanted to shy away from that, because there's always going to be a case when they say, well, your diagram didn't say I had to go there,
Right.
or we have a catch-all that says, and any other applicable. But yeah, I think this is a good place to give people the basic lowdown on.
How about the statement, we're not any zoning enforcement board or a policy-making board? Do you think that needs to be included? Because somebody will say, well, I'm coming to the planning board because I noticed a zoning violation, or is that redundant?
That might fit somewhere into the section 1 or 2. What was one that was introduction? Yeah.
Yes, it's introduction. And then you have your organization, which starts off with the duties of the board.
And there could possibly be, you could at the end of that say things that are not duties of this board, and that's where Joe's statement, we are not an enforcement.
Correct. Yeah, we could.
We're not a collections bureau. We're not a,
Yeah.
But in line with that, Andy, in the past, we have had people that would come to us, or board members that would point out zoning problems, and generally we present it to our full board, and then we vote on it. And when we vote on it, we vote to send the concern to the building inspector or the zoning enforcement officer.
Correct.
I don't think that has to be included, but that's just the way we operate with a concern.
Yeah, perhaps not procedure to include in this document, but I think a fair approach to fielding concerns from citizens.
Because of institutional knowledge on this board, many times somebody at town hall will say, well, go to the planning board.
That's
You know?
fair. Absolutely. And so thank you, gentlemen, for class tonight. It's been helpful. I always do appreciate joining you and bringing you hopefully something to contribute to your wonderful work. I think this the last 30 minutes or so has been a helpful exercise because, like you said, Mike, there's a lot of institutional knowledge, and I believe you brought it up or someone else in our last meeting. I like the document to reflect how Hadley does business, and it's readable and it's accessible, and I appreciate the feedback tonight. I think I have enough direction. I think I have something, a lot to accomplish, but I think we can, like you said, Bill, I think this could go a lot faster than I would fear.
Well, one of my concerns has been the transition to the next planning board members, because it's going to happen. It will happen. And I don't know if this is an appropriate place to try to figure something out, but
Well, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We're writing down what we do. Someone comes into the board and Jim or I usually, or Joe gives them the same spiel every time about come in to see us informally, then file with us so that we can review for completeness, and then you should take it to peer review, you've heard it enough times now that you and Mark can probably repeat it from memory, but writing it down is going to that's going to be our transition plan, that this is what's worked for us and this is how we've done it. And let's capture it as best we can here, so that when someone comes in with zero experience, you can hand them this. It's probably going to be more important to a new board member than to a community member.
Well, my main concern is a transition plan for you and Mr. Maximowski.
Well, it's the old adage, write down what you do and then do what you say.
Yeah.
And that way, to your point, Mike, if it's written down,
good.
It doesn't have to be super specific, but it has to be specific enough that somebody new coming in, should something happen to one or all three of us, God forbid, at least there's guidelines on how to operate.
Well, and then someone at PVPC can help people interpret this stuff. I mean, I think that's why we've got them.
Well, we've got them because, Mike, this is another historical perspective. There was a committee formed, I call it the anti-planning board, that wanted to get a town planner that they would appoint and that could overrule or basically dictate what's going to happen to the members that were elected. And so one of the compromise was, yes, why don't we hire Pioneer Valley Planning Authority? They can help us negotiate some of the more difficult zoning regulations and also help us craft zoning bylaws. So from the inception, they've been very helpful. But certainly, like many organizations, that organization has gotten huge,
So I do want to assure you, Kyle, that it is easier to edit than to create. So this is not intended as a criticism of your work. We're just working our way through it.
No, I do appreciate that, Bill, and I appreciate the process, and I take it all in stride and recognize it's part of it. I think once we have everything here, the editing will come along quickly, and I appreciate everybody's attention to that. I'll be sure to get this with enough headway so everyone will have plenty of time to review, and I'll try to be respectful of the board's practice of getting things to you on Fridays, if not sooner. But I welcome any feedback. You have the document in the email. I'm happy to resend it. And I can also send it as I think I sent it as a PDF, so I can send it as a Word document if you'd prefer. Just let me know. And yeah, please, I welcome all the feedback. That's all I have for this document tonight. Thank you.
Great. Anything else, Mr. Kyle? Anything from Mr. Comia? With you, Mr. Ken.
Well, other than really appreciating Kyle's work on many of these various documents that a lot of the planning boards that we're working with, it's this type of work. We're putting together a set of rules and regulations, and we're having similar conversations about what belongs in there and what doesn't. So it's very helpful, I think, for both Kyle and myself to create some efficiencies and understand some efficiencies as we do this work elsewhere. And what may work in Hadley is not necessarily going to work in Pelham, vice versa. But I think since our last meeting, the biggest to do, and I don't know if the board has given an additional thought to DLTA that at the moment is due on Friday, that application. There was the conversation that we had at the last meeting, which was regarding an assessment of parcels for a possible 40R district. Whether or not that's something that the board wants to do, I will say that you're probably not alone if that's something that you would want to do. I have at least 3 applications that are coming in that are going to be looking at 40R. So I'm here to, address any questions that you may have as to what the expectations may be for the application. I think as you've done in the past, the application is pretty minimal. It's a narrative. It's, maybe aligning some pages from the various plans that the town has adopted. You've adopted the master plan. You have adopted the housing production plan. And then just attaching that to documents that you would forward to the executive director. So I think that was the other component of work that we're currently working on. This discussion of 40R, that's something that the board still wants to work on. In addition to any other tasks that you may identify in your work plan. But it's the rules and regs that Kyle's been working on, and anything else.
And would this be a subcommittee, or is this just something that, how does that work?
So you mean what, DLT, like how that DLTA project?
If Hadley applies and they receive the DLTA grant,
Sure.
how does that operate on a 40R?
It can operate in multiple ways. So similarly to the housing production plan, you had a committee that was made up of members of the community, in addition to probably representing other committees in town. I could foresee, the discussion points and presentation of data that would be presented to the town go through that committee. In some towns, when they work on 40R, it's working with the town planner and the planning board and attending the planning board meetings. So, it's dependent on how, if you were awarded that particular grant, how you would want this particular process to look like. But as you may know, as you probably know, is the grant runs from January to December. So, within the work plan, identifying time, in addition to maybe anything else that you may have us working on outside of DLTA.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen. I did put it on the agenda for tonight. I did put the application on. I filled it out and I've done a narrative. So let me just bring up a couple of things.
I'll just note that Mike had his hand raised.
So here is the narrative for the DLTA. You can see that. Let me get it a little bigger. Yeah. That's not what I wanted. That's not what I wanted. Okay, I don't know where it went. So hang on a sec. I'll try again.
You just had it.
Okay, well, let me go to the application first. As Ken said, it's very basic. That's it. You know, just have authorize Jim to sign it. No, stop share on that. And go back to the narrative. And start share on that. Okay, so again, it is a very brief narrative. You want to take a look at that? If you have any suggestions. Supposed to be a future town meeting.
I guess the key word is that we have been discussing 40R as a board for months, and the impetus for this came from CDC proposing the Econo Lodge as a 40R property, and that was going to be our lead property in this 40R application. But in the meantime, there's no longer legal things happening regarding that property. The state has decided, Ken, that it'll be affordable housing. So is that included in a 40R application if there's a fait accompli?
You mean the impetus for creating a 40R district would have started if the 40B, would there be a need for a 40R if the 40B project was approved? Is that what you're asking?
The state has said that there was some, there was a lawsuit, and the state has decided that the Econo Lodge will be affordable housing in spite of what.
Go further, Mike. The select board denied the funding for the zoning board of appeals, who made the decision. So they could fight that and we could win because we have 11.9% of our housing as affordable. But it appears that this has become more political than one would like to see. And we will work through a compromise by seeing if we could include the Econo Lodge in the 40R and then help to kind of dictate what type of people would be living there. But
so this kind of blows the 40R out of the water. Why even proceed if the state is going to tell you what you have to do?
Well, that's one project. The 40R.
This is an important.
The 40R district. We've talked about it all around the edges of it. But what we have not done is actually gotten to the point of what a 40R bylaw would look like.
Well,
we haven't. We have not.
Well, in all due respect, the original impetus was the hope that we could put the Econo Lodge in 40B. But Ken came back and saying we have to do something a little bit more global. And that's not
that's the district area, but it doesn't say anything about what the district rules will be. I mean, are we going to limit it to duplexes? Are we going to allow 3 three-story apartment buildings. I think that's the kind of detail that we've not gotten into on something like this.
Well, I guess
get it-
the problem, excuse me, go ahead. The problem is that if you're not going to defend the zoning bylaw in court, why have a zoning bylaw? Why put something in about 40R if it's not going to be defended?
Exactly right. And it's going to be a tough sell at the town meeting, to try to defend something where we have, our number is 11.9% affordable housing, yet they overrule us by putting more in. Then, of course, the motel down the street too.
So one thing we've learned is that the 40R is not a quick fix. If we are looking at doing something with 40R, taking it to the May 2025 annual town meeting is probably the quickest turnaround we can anticipate. So we're looking at we're talk about planning. This is 18 months out, and the goal of getting the grant in the next year would be to take some time to put together, fill in the blanks on the sketch we have, and see what it would really look like. And then at that point, we could take it to town meeting, and you can say what you want about it at town meeting.
Okay, my question to you, Bill, is if we come up with a 40R and let's say we would like to put just the Econo Lodge section into 40R, or one small section, which would be tantamount to spot zoning, would we propose something like that to our town
Well,
meeting?
we know that
Would
we
it
would
say we
not-
would like all of Route 9 converted from business to apartments?
Well, my point is, isn't the Econo Lodge now out of play? Isn't it out of play?
Well, it was out of play for 40R anyway, because when we had the gentleman from Boston, he said that when you do a 40R after a failed 40B, the state doesn't give you the per unit cash payment that generally comes with a 40R. But if we talk about something a little more expansive, let's say Econo Lodge plus the Hampshire Mall property, and what could we develop that would work for that? Or maybe extend it down as far as Howard Johnson's. I agree. We're not looking for the plan that was shared a few months ago was a wish list. But I think that I want to just separate the area with the text of what the zoning bylaw, the meat of what a zoning bylaw would look like. We're told we have all sorts of options about allowing this type and that type, but we haven't really explored what that looks like. And I think we also need to get something out there and get a sense of what we can zone everything we want for 3-story apartment buildings, but it's not going to get us, it's not going to happen if there's not a developer out there who's interested in building that product. So I would like to know more about what a 40R district, how you put it together, what you can allow and what you can restrict. And I'd like to put in the grant application, see if we can get some help getting a little further along, and we'll see where it leads.
Yes, Kyle.
If I may, just offer a perspective. Ken and I were in a meeting with another community today who they have adopted 2 separate 40R districts. And having adopted those a few years ago, to date, nothing has broken ground. There's only one that has a developer in line. They're lining up financing. And then the other one is likely unappealing, the way that the text is written. It may seem like a prime property for redevelopment. And that community is actually considering revising that existing 40R bylaw. So just going back to what Mr. Dwyer said about planning and timelines, this work, if you were to apply for the grant and go through the process, it might not really materialize in dramatic change for years, if at all.
That's not the issue here, but you have your say.
Well,
The issue is whether you have a zoning bylaw and you decide to defend it in court or not.
The issue I have with proceeding ahead is that, yes, we have a master plan every 5 to 7 years, and then we list the things that people are concerned about. And the overwhelming concern is that we preserve the open space agricultural land of the town of Hadley. But oftentimes, people will come down to the 10th item in what people are wishing for, and they'll say, well, it's in your master plan. And that if it's in the master plan, then the planning board is got to be looking at it to approve it. And so I'm afraid if we start down this road, people are going to say, well, the planning board said it's 40 hours looked at, and maybe we should adopt it. So that's my concern.
I agree.
I will say that absolutely, I am not in favor of extending a 40R to any undeveloped land. It would only, in my opinion, work for redevelopment, adaptive reuse of existing developed property. The Hampshire Mall, the Mountain Farms Mall, the Howard Johnsons, they're never going back into agriculture.
Okay, you make a valid point there, but the other side of the point is this term smart growth. Every time there is some housing or an apartment complex next to a large development, whether it be Lowe's or whether it be the 3-story apartment house that went in at the Amherst Hadley town line, people, because they live in the area, are going to oppose it. So it adversely affects the future of the business zone in Route 9.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, Bill, but once you get in bed, so to speak, with the state on this, you don't know what's going to happen. And it was proved with the decision a couple weeks ago. Once you get in bed with the state and they start giving you money, all bets are off.
I just want to add a comment. If I thought I heard something earlier to the contrary, my understanding is that, I would like to proceed with applying for this grant with the understanding that there's no commitment that we're going to push a 40R. We're investigating. We're looking if it fits us well. We're looking what we can and can't do about it. It's just, I think the DLTA would be a shame to miss the opportunity to investigate this opportunity more.
Well, I'm in favor of applying for this grant to research the zone bylaw portion of it. I mean, start with something, see what we get. If it goes to town meeting, if we get something out of it and it goes to town meeting and they say no, they say no. End of problem. End of discussion.
I'll just point out that how I worded this very intentionally. Explore Chapter 40R zoning district on Route 9.
Okay, that's helpful.
Commitment.
Of course, now that Ken knows that we're probably not get a grant now because we're not gung-ho for this.
Should it say something about a bylaw too, Bill?
I think it's inherent that
In the
To
40R.
adopt the 40R zoning district, you have to create a bylaw.
Okay,
But let's leap forward after the study's done and we got a 40R district. Can the Econo Lodge be included in that if the state said this is gonna be affordable housing no matter what the town wants?
I think it can be. I don't know as it needs to be.
That
Does
would,
it, does the
that's-
Econo Lodge count for affordable housing units?
yes,
It pumps the numbers up?
yes,
but you'll never get that one-time payout from the state.
yeah,
because-
well,
Never,
according to
but
the
you know,
gentleman from the state, he said no. The state is so hungry for this kind of stuff, you never know.
well, they're gonna do it up at the Kittredge property in Leverett.
We need to do a
I will make a motion.
motion,
I'll make a motion to apply for the grant.
and I would second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Well, I think my concerns have been heard. And if you, to quote Benjamin Franklin, you've got a republic if you can keep it. And to bring it forward, you got a zoning bylaw if you defend it. But I'm gonna vote for Bill's motion.
With that said, any other discussion? Just to cover our bases on this, I'll go for a roll call vote. Mr. Dwyer,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes,
Mr. Sarzi,
Yes,
Mr. Zagrodnik.
I'll abstain.
Okay, Mr. Maximowski, yes. Motion passes 4-0, one abstention.
on what grounds is he abstaining?
Oh, yeah.
Can I just email you that with a signature?
Listening to me, Mike, when I was giving my speech, so.
I think that there are directions. I think you have to include the executive director. It should be directed to her. And then there's some additional copy lines, but you can definitely copy me on that.
Okay,
Okay. I'll get you the application tonight. If you can sign it and either electronically or ink and scan it back to me, I'll get it in.
okay, all right.
When would you like to come back, PVPC? We traditionally been trying to do the first Tuesday for planning, but that's January 2nd, coming off of a holiday week, basically. And we do have a public hearing scheduled, the same one the Garden Center gentleman was continued to that. We do have a public hearing on the 16th as well. That is for a very small subdivision. That probably is not going to be much of an issue because the abutter next door himself is the beneficiary of a very small subdivision a few years ago. So I don't anticipate that that's going to be a hot night. So does the 16th work, or would you like to hold on to the 2nd?
I think between Kyle and I, if we're considering the rules and regs, Kyle probably would be he's the one that's working the closest on it. And I think he may be available, but I think if anything, it may just be him. But that probably makes sense to do the 16th if Kyle's available.
That does work for me. So I'll plan on the 16th.
And would we be likely at that point to know the outcome of the DLTA grants?
That's a good question. I'm hoping so, because the intention of creating the process before the new year is that we would be able to move a lot sooner rather than mid-March, which has been typically the time that we've started DLTA projects. So I'm hoping by that time we would have knowledge of the projects that were chosen.
Okay, so if we are successful, that'll give us a chance to do some planning for that as well.
Sure.
Okay. I don't see anything else.
Tom Quinlan? Any drainage issues?
The issues never stop, but we're working on them.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. I've got nothing else.
Anybody else have anything? I have nothing else. All right, motion to adjourn,
So moved.
Seconded?
all in
Second.
favor? Aye,
Aye.
meeting is history. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Kyle, and thank you,
Good night.